Robert Bork on Larry King Live tonight.
Deadly violence in Israel spills into sacred ground as Palestinian and Israeli leaders blame each other for the escalation. The 104th Congress began with a contract with America. Will it end with a bang or a fizzle? We'll have a live assessment. And these so-called smart cards were supposed to move America towards a society without cash. But are criminals smarter than they are? Hello and welcome to NewsDay. I'm Sonia Russler in Washington. Today, the holy city of Jerusalem is filled with unholy deaths. Clashes between Israelis and Palestinians have left at least 60 people dead this week, and the violence continued today as desperate attempts were made to put the peace process back on track. Well, CNN's Gerald Kessel joins us live from our Jerusalem bureau with the latest. Gerald.
Sonia, there have been again clashes around the West Bank and Gaza between Israelis and Palestinians for the third straight day. They have tapered off to some degree, but not before there have been more fatalities. At least 6 Palestinians and 2 Israeli soldiers. And the worst of the trouble was in Jerusalem. Here at the central shrines, the Islamic shrines on what is known as the Haram al-Sharif, the noble or holy sanctuary in Arabic, the old Jewish Temple Mount. It was here after the main noonday prayers that demonstrations broke out, protesting Muslim worshippers or people who had been there with the worshippers, began stoning Israeli troops and soldiers who were, troops and police who were on the fringes of that sanctuary, on the outskirts, stoned them, and in response, the Israeli troops and border police and police opened fire, having opened fire with rubber bullets, first with tear gas and then rubber bullets. There's some reports that it might have been live fire too. That's not confirmed. But as a result, 3 Palestinians were killed, and more Israeli forces, police and border police, rushed into the temple compound, into the mosque compound area, and several hundred of the worshippers took refuge inside the shrines, and for a long period there was a major standoff. Afterwards, the situation cleared, but not without the natural fallout from such another serious confrontation between Israelis and Palestinians here in Jerusalem. But apart from that, there certainly has been not really movement, but maneuvering on the political level. It is a very fluid political situation, and on both sides we've had no real soul-searching, rather mutual recriminations and blame as each side dug into their version of events, and it seemed to be no closer to getting together in trying to resolve this outbreak of conflict. This is what the 2 leaders, Benjamin Netanyahu and Yasser Arafat, had to say today in public appearances.
He has to start keeping order against terrorists and not firing weapons against Israeli soldiers. He must stop the incitement. He must personally intervene and stop the incitement so that it is heard from him. And thirdly, once we go back to these principles of keeping, each of us keeping our obligations, to go back to the negotiating table. We're discussing a number of possibilities of meetings. I'm prepared to meet Mr. Arafat. Our hand is stretched out in peace, and we expect a similar attitude.
The attack on the prayers in the mosque is an unacceptable matter. Now, I have spoken with Mr. Weissman, President of Israel, and I explained to him the suffering we are going through. I thank everyone who came to the support of the peace process, because the peace process is the only way away from all the violence.
Despite this digging in on both sides, certainly there are attempts, as there have been over the last 24 hours, to get the 2 leaders, the Palestinian and Israeli leader, together in a summit, perhaps under the auspices of President Mubarak in Egypt. This has so far failed. There were major attempts by the United States to pressure them in that direction. It perhaps will be the only thing that might impel them to go that way. They seem to be digging in with the violence, although tapering off, continuing. But that's where the situation is right now. Sonia?
Gerald, any sign from Israel's government that they're prepared to close that tunnel that sparked all this violence off?
Not at all. Not at all. Mr. Netanyahu made it plain at his news conference today that this was nothing that he would consider at all. He said he didn't believe that it was a mistake. He didn't believe that the timing of the opening of that tunnel was a mistake. He said it may have been, as the Palestinians say, an excuse, but they would have found an excuse on another score, and it was a perfectly innocent act. It was not aimed, he said, at the Muslim holy sanctuaries. It was nothing more than a tourist archaeological site, and he had no regrets about doing it. There certainly was no apology for having done it, and he did not seem to be ready to back off and to make any kind of gesture on that score at all.
CNN's Gerald Kessel from Jerusalem, thanks for bringing us the latest. Well, the U.S. has invested a great deal in this Middle East peace process, and it's watching the latest crisis with real concern. Appeals from the Clinton administration to end the fighting are so far not having much effect. Now, to put all this into perspective, we're joined by CNN's World Affairs correspondent Ralph Begleiter. Ralph, what is the Clinton administration doing to try to stop this?
Well, Sonia, you put it right in just the right word. The Clinton administration is watching with a great deal of concern, but it's a very low-key, behind-the-scenes effort by the United States at this point. You have not seen any direct involvement by President Clinton. We're told by the White House that he has not made any calls to Middle East leaders to urge them to settle their differences between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Secretary of State Warren Christopher has met in New York with the Foreign Minister of Syria, the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, other Gulf states, and with the Foreign Minister of Egypt here today. He will also in New York today meet with Israeli Foreign Minister David Levy. All of those things have occurred in a very low-key way as well. You have not heard kind of loud and strident public statements by Mr. Christopher either, calling on any of the sides to curtail the fighting. You have heard privately U.S. officials suggesting the Israelis made a mistake by opening that tunnel at this moment. Even Mr. Netanyahu's own security chief said in Jerusalem today that it was the last straw for the Palestinians in a long period of frustration over the failure to make progress in the various agreements since Mr. Netanyahu took office. Now, former U.S. Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, Sonia, who has dealt with this, with a Likud government before, the last Likud government, was here at CNN, and we asked him about the opening of the tunnel and what kind of a trigger that might have been for the events of the last 4 days.
When you're sitting on a powder keg in a firecracker factory, it's not the time to begin smoking cigarettes. He didn't have to open up that tunnel. And to argue now that it was just an excuse may or may not be true, but the fact is that if he'd kept that closed, and if he'd been trying to reach out to try to bring these people, bring the talks back to progress, it might have made a difference. I'm not trying to lay all of this on Mr. Netanyahu, but I do have to tell you, I think the proximate cause of all of this is the frustration triggered by that last straw.
Current U.S. officials are also saying in the wake of Mr. Netanyahu's news conference in Jerusalem today that it's time to cool the rhetoric in the Middle East. Sonia?
We heard General Kessel earlier saying how they're all there looking to the United States to help resolve this, but why should the United States help them?
Well, the United States has, as you said, had a big stake in the Middle East peace process, and all of the countries, the Arabs and the Israelis, have long, for many years, turned to the United States for help in this. It has always been the United States that's had the credibility, if you will, to bring all the sides to the negotiations. And the fact is, in the last few years, the U.S. has been able to bring the sides together in a way that they did eventually reach their own agreements, the Palestinians and the Israelis. What has happened in the last 6 or 8 months, however, though, has been a breakdown in that peace process, whereby the Israelis have chosen to elect a different leader with a different set of views on how to proceed in the peace process, quite different from the view of the Clinton administration in the United States. You've got a large and influential group of American Jews who do affect the political process in the United States. So you've got that kind of interest. There are a large number of tourists, not only Americans, but from all over the world, who go to Jerusalem and who have an interest in what happens to that nation and to that city, both in terms of religious terms as well as political terms.
CNN's World Affairs correspondent Ralph Begleiter, thanks. Now to news of what could have been a hijack. The authorities have foiled an attempted hijacking early today on a U.S. air flight from Las Vegas to Charlotte, North Carolina. The FBI says the alleged hijacker, 25-year-old Danny Christopher Walters of North Carolina is now in custody. He was subdued by officers who boarded the plane after it made an emergency landing at Nashville International Airport. Now, it's unclear whether the suspect was armed and what his motive might have been. None of the 125 passengers and crew was injured in the incident. Stormy weather already has started in some parts of the United States, and the weekend promises to be even stormier. So let's check in with Flip Spicer and look at what much of us can expect. Flip.
At least in the east it will be stormier, but now the west is clearing out. They're going to be just fine, but not after getting hit with this big storm that continues to push eastward through the country. Snowfall was found in abundance throughout the Rockies and in the Black Hills, too. We have some tape to show you from the Black Hills. It's actually shot in Rapid City, South Dakota, and you can see that they had, in many places, as much as 3 inches in the mountains. They were actually measuring it in feet. Now, as this weather system is pushing to the east, it has been producing severe weather and heavy rainfall, flooding in Oklahoma and Texas. There are a couple of severe weather watches in effect at this hour. This is a new severe thunderstorm watch that has just been issued, actually about 1 hour ago, and the red box is a tornado watch is in effect. We'll be back a little bit later in the hour and show you where this weather system is going, but I think you can look at the map and tell it does not bode well for a good weekend in the east. Sonia?
Well, thanks, Flip, and we'll be back checking with you with the full weekend forecast in a moment. But now, the battles aren't over yet, but the members of both political parties are declaring victory today as the 104th congressional session inches towards a close. CNN's Bob Franken joins us now from Capitol Hill, where lawmakers are celebrating while still tackling some unfinished business. Bob.
Sonia, the victory will be when they can go home. As far as most members are concerned, the 104th is about to become history, and it has made some history. As a matter of fact, there's a little anniversary today. It is 2 years to the day, the anniversary of the signing of the contract with America. And to commemorate the event, Republicans held a replication of it on the same West Capitol steps. The contract with America, I should point out, only promised that a variety of issues that had been tested in the polls would be debated in the first 100 days by the House of Representatives. No promise further than that. That, in fact, was kept, although most of the items in the contract have not become law. As for whether or not the 104th Congress with its Republican takeover was a good thing or a bad thing, there are a variety of opinions on that. Of course, the poster boy of this Congress is none other than House Speaker Newt Gingrich.
I would just say to every American citizen, you asked for real change in 1994. We kept our word. We used common sense. And if you don't want to go back to you having to pay higher taxes to subsidize their perks, and you having to pay higher taxes to subsidize their lobbyists, and you want to continue to balance the budget, continue to cut taxes, continue to reform welfare, and take on the drug dealers and the violent criminals, then we will apply the same common sense, the same courage, and the same commitment in 1997 that we brought to this place in 1995.
Now, it was not only the Republicans who were commemorating the signing of the contract with America, the Democrats did too, and I don't think it'll surprise you that they had an entirely different view of it.
The Republicans are fond of saying promises made, promises kept. But I think nearly everyone in America is overjoyed that thanks to congressional Democrats and President Clinton, Gingrich was unable to keep his promise of passing his extreme agenda into law.
So what we have is a different view, of course, about this Congress. You have the Republicans calling this the common sense Congress, the Democrats calling it extremist, and it'll all be decided in the upcoming election. Sonia?
Bob, this is the Congress that shut down the government. Are they really thinking of doing it again?
Well, as a matter of fact, there is a debate going on now about the funding of the federal government, which is required to avoid a shutdown, some sort of funding coming before midnight on Monday. Everybody promises that there will be no shutdown this time, and everybody expects that will be the case, but I would warn you, they made the same promises last year.
CNN's Bob Franken on Capitol Hill. Thanks. To the campaign, Bob Dole's spending a few days in Florida working on his tan and his debating techniques. His first face-off against Bill Clinton is scheduled for October the 6th. And yesterday, Dole appealed to senior citizens during several campaign stops and accused Clinton of trying to scare them into thinking Republicans want to cut their Medicare. The latest CNN USA Today Gallup poll shows Dole just 10 points behind Clinton. It is Dole's best number since we started tracking the race daily, and it's Clinton's worst. Now, Bill Clinton's venturing deep into the heart of Texas today, aiming to become the first Democrat to carry the state since Jimmy Carter. Texas Democrats had hoped his appearance would boost the chances of Senate candidate Victor Morales, who's in hot water after calling a Mexican-American congressman a coconut and a wannabe white. Morales hopes to unseat Republican Senator Phil Gramm. Still ahead, ValueJet, still living up to its name, prepares to fly again. And Richard Allen Davis is sentenced to death for the kidnap and murder of 12-year-old Polly Klaas. We'll hear from his family as he faces his sentence.
CNN's coverage of Campaign 96 is brought to you by Pfizer. We're part of the cure.
In his college days, cardiologist George Lustig loved to compete. But for many years, high blood pressure held him back. Now, thanks to healthy living and medicine developed by Pfizer Research, he's back in the race. And the 2 gold medals he won in the U.S. Masters Nationals prove hypertension isn't all he's beating. Pfizer, we're part of the cure.
That wide brown stripe means we're in for a harsh winter.
No, mild winter.
Wait, it's the black stripes, which means blizzards.
While opinions on the weather have differed, folks have always agreed Lennox is the name to trust for heating and cooling.
Let's ask Dave.
And you can still count on Lennox today, even if you can't count on the forecast.
Got a question, boys? Never mind.
Lennox, one less thing to worry about.
Sure, you're a successful investor. But what might it take to become even more successful? What if there were an easier, more convenient way to trade? More information, more choices. Enter Fidelity Investments. Call Fidelity Discount Brokerage Services, and you'll have the resources of one of Wall Street's most experienced traders at your fingertips. Imagine placing trades for stocks, bonds, and mutual funds 24 hours a day, in person, over the phone, even from the comfort of your living room. You'll have easy access to independent research and analysis because the better informed investor is often the more successful investor. Plus, you'll get some of the lowest margin rates in the industry and save up to 76% in commissions, more if you trade electronically. Call Fidelity now. Open a brokerage account and your first trade is free. So, isn't it time you had Fidelity Investments working for you?
Today on CNN's Burden of Proof, Joe Bosco had one of the best seats in the courthouse for O.J. Simpson's criminal trial. But did he see the same trial other authors saw? With Roger in Santa Monica, we'll also have the latest on the civil suits, 12:30 Eastern on CNN.
ValueJet returns to the air Monday with a special incentive for customers. The No Frills airline is offering a one-way fare as low as $19, but it is a limited deal with restrictions. Now, the first flights will be from Atlanta to Washington and to 3 Florida cities. Eventually, ValueJet will serve 17 destinations, about 1/3 of the number served before the May 11th Everglades crash that killed 110 people. Federal authorities shut down the airline in June because of doubts about its maintenance program. All those pre-approved credit card applications that have definitely been clogging your mailbox are being criticized by the controller of the currency. The federal bank regulator is urging banks to improve their basic lending controls. Banks last year mailed nearly 3 billion credit card solicitations, about 17 for each adult American. And the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation follows that survey with its own, finding that consumer loans rose 36% to nearly $4 billion in this year's second quarter, and most of that rise was from credit card debt. And those so-called smart money cards may not be living up to their name. The banks say they are the key to a cashless society. But some researchers find that criminals are just plain smarter. CNN's Steve Young explains.
Scientists have issued a wake-up call a bit late to the companies that have already issued 2.2 million Visa smart cards around the world. The plastic cards containing a microprocessor and memory were introduced during the Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta. Bell communication scientists now warn smart cards can be outfoxed by smart counterfeiters.
The attack that we mounted was to physically subject the card to stresses of various kinds that cause it to essentially misbehave.
The first step in counterfeiting smart cards would be forcing them to make a calculation goof. It would give a new meaning to the phrase, cooking the books. Cooking the cards in a microwave oven would be one way to trigger the mistake. A more advanced method would be showering the cards with radiation. Bell Corps scientists say the secret data authenticating the user could then be decoded. Bell Corps warns such crimes are inevitable unless smart cards are redesigned. One analyst says that warning could be a blessing in disguise, since smart cards are still the exception, not the rule.
What will be very important when they come out is that people feel certain that they have been adequately tested. And I think this kind of thing is actually going to be constructive.
Chase, Citibank, MasterCard, and Visa plan a smart card test with 50,000 New York customers. A Chase spokesman vows those cards will be smarter than counterfeiters when they're introduced later this year. Steve Young, CNN Financial News, New York.
The father of murdered 12-year-old Polly Klaas says his daughter's killer would try anything to get him. And yesterday, before Richard Allen Davis was sentenced to death, he made an allegation that prompted Mark Klaas to lunge at Davis and storm from the courtroom. Davis suggested the young girl told him her father had molested her. The sentencing was an ordeal that tore at the Klaas and Davis families, as they said last night on Larry King Live.
A lot worse people have gotten off with life.
And so, in your view, that would have been the right sentence, to sentence him to life?
Well, I think so. I mean, there's a lot, I mean, I'm not saying what he did was right.
My family has been stuck with this devil who will bedevil us for the rest of our lives, who will continue to inflict pain upon us, who will continue to try to humiliate us, and most certainly something can be served by Richard Allen Davis's death. The fact that we won't have to put up with him any longer.
In California, death sentences are automatically appealed. Well, she's broken records in space, and now she is turning into an earthbound celebrity. We'll listen in on part of a conversation between astronaut Shannon Lucid and a big admirer.
Some would say going 100,000 copies without an unscheduled service call is impressive. Sharp would say, it's a beginning. Sharp. Call for your free interactive kit of copier solutions.
What would happen if a company cared more about its community than about the financial community? What if a company thought less about public relations and more about the public? What if a company spent less time listening to the press and more time listening to its customers? We're LG, a $64 billion company in 120 countries.
At some pharmacies, you never know who's going to fill your prescription.
May I help you?
May I help you?
May I help you?
May I help you? But at the Medicine Shop Pharmacy, there's never a question, because our pharmacists are also owners.
Thanks.
The Medicine Shop Pharmacy, the pharmacy that's all about your health. Get a free primetime gift pack with valuable samples and special offers for your healthy lifestyle from the Medicine Shop Pharmacy, the pharmacy that's all about your health.
When I got rid of my gray hair, I wanted a natural look, so I didn't take any chances. I used the sure thing for a natural look called Just for Men.
Apply Just for Men, and in 5 minutes, rinse. It's specially timed to blend away gray, bring back your natural look, and condition hair.
It's a sure thing.
Just for Men, the sure thing for a natural look. And now try Just for Men Color Gel for the hard-to-color hair of mustaches and beards. Brush in, rinse out. Just 5 minutes.
At Sharp, we have a full line of copiers that suit the needs of your business, no matter how big your business becomes. Call for your free interactive kit of copier solutions.
Sunday, CNN explores the issues facing America. One nation, indivisible. For many Americans, a long-lost ideal. With the country facing deep divisions. Divisions based on race, wealth, religion, Is there reason to fear those we perceive as different? The ties that bind may also be the ties that divide us and them. On the next Democracy in America, Sunday, 9 Eastern on CNN.
She's a biochemist, a wife, and a mother, and now she's also a record-setting celebrity. Shannon Lucid is thrilled to be back on Earth with her family after 6 months on the Russian space station Mir. And since the astronaut arrived back aboard the shuttle Atlantis yesterday, she's been hearing from all kinds of VIPs, including a first fan.
On behalf of my wife and daughter, is that you've been a terrific inspiration for young women around the country and all around the world, and I know as you get out and around and people get to congratulate you, you'll see that. But it's a wonderful thing for these young girls that may have non-traditional aspirations to see someone like you up there doing that.
Well, thank you, sir. You know, I just didn't really give a thought to that. It was just something that I'd always wanted to do, and I was just, you know, very glad that it worked out.
After hearing that Lucid was craving chocolate candies, the president sent her some as a welcome home gift. Well, it is the weekend, and we do want the full forecast from Flip Spiceland. Flip, tell us all about it now.
Not a lot of good news if you live anywhere in the eastern one half of the nation. You can see the bright white cloudiness here associated with the cold front, and then a secondary cold front is apparently going to develop in Canada and slide down into the northern plain states, where in South Dakota, North Dakota, and the Black Hills area back to the northern Rockies, lots of snowfall has been reported over the last couple of days. There was snow in Denver, but you know what? As is typical of Denver, tomorrow they'll be close to 70 degrees, and they'll be saying bye-bye to that snowfall. But in the east, the heavy weather is expected to continue, and severe weather does continue at this hour down here along the Gulf Coast. I'll show you that. That is our weather point. There is the line of very, very heavy thunderstorms at this hour. We move on now to the latest on Hurricane Isidore, which is still well out in the Atlantic with top wind speeds now of 105 miles an hour, but already moving to the northwest. So we assume that it is continue to be no threat to a land mass. Quick look at the national radar summary shows you that line of very heavy weather down here, which was our weather point. I will plot now the 2 severe weather watches that continue in effect at this hour. The red one, our tornado watch. The golden one there is a severe thunderstorm watch. It is in effect. That's the latest look at the weather maps. Take a look now at a few specific forecasts for cities across North America. Okay, we're not going to take a look at a few cities across North America. Now, back to Sonia.
Thanks, Flip, and have a good weekend. Well, that is it for Newsday. I'm Sonia Rissler in Washington. And for up-to-the-minute news, you can check out our website at cnn.com. But next is Burden of Proof. And today, author Joseph Bosco discusses his book, The Problem of Evidence, How the Prosecution Freed O.J. Simpson.